Turning now to Psalm 124, a song of ascents of David. Were it not for the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now declare. Were it not for the Lord who was on our side, when men assailed us, they would have swallowed us alive in their burning rage against us. The waters would have carried us off, the torrent would have swept over us. Over us would have swept the seething waters. Blessed is the Lord, who did not let us be ripped apart by their teeth. We are like a bird escaped from the fowler's trap. The trap broke and we escaped. Our help is the name of the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. The psalm starts off with a kind of an awkward and repetitious phrasing. Were it not for the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now declare. Were it not for the Lord who was on our side, when men assailed us. So we have that repetition of the same Hebrew phrase, Lule Adonai Shahayalanu, were it not for the Lord who we had, or who was with us, or was on our side. And I think the reason for the repetition is to emphasize and to kind of draw out and emphasize the idea that if God had not been on Israel's side, Israel would not even have been in a position to declare if God were not on our side, and so on and so forth, because Israel, or the people of Israel, would not exist. The very nature, the very reality of Israel's survival and existence, according to the psalmist here, is pinned on God's favoring God's people and being on their side. If not for God, the psalmist says, the enemies would have swallowed them up. The waters, namely the forces of nature, would have destroyed them. In other words, they would have perished either by the hand of humankind, by their human enemies, or by forces of nature set against them. And he concludes by saying, our help is the name of the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. I'm interested in the use of the word swallowed us alive here. In the Hebrew, azai chayim velaunu. And this actually made me think of an actual verse in the Yom Kippur liturgy during the additional service of the martyrology, it's called. And the Hebrew term for the martyrology is Eila Ezkara. These we recall, these we remember. And the martyrology, at least traditionally, consists of references to the 10 rabbis during the 2nd century of the Common Era who defied Roman edicts against teaching Torah and observing Jewish life. And because they defied the Romans, they were sentenced to death and cruelly tortured and killed. They were considered to be martyrs. And so on Yom Kippur, during the additional service, we always include a section called the martyrology, during which time we remember the martyrs who came before us and reflect on the fact that if not for their sacrifice, we ourselves would not be here to worship God, to commemorate Yom Kippur and all the other holidays and festivals. We would simply not exist. We would not be alive if not for the martyrs. In the psalm here, the psalmist is saying, were it not for God, he and the rest of the Jewish people would not exist. In the martyrology, the section is introduced with the following statement. Eila eskara v'nafshi alai eshbacha. These I will remember and I will pour out my soul. Ki v'la'unu zedim or zarim, depending on which version you use. Zedim means demons and zarim means foreigners, in this context enemies. Ki v'la'unu zedim ke'uga bali hafucha. The translation I have in front of me says, how the arrogant have devoured us. And a more exact translation would be something like, because the enemies or the demons have swallowed us, devoured or swallowed us like a cake that has not been turned over. The reference there probably has to do with a kind of a thin cake that is baked over coals and bakes very, very quickly because of its thinness and doesn't really need to be turned. It bakes quickly, and someone would just snatch that cake off the coals after it has been cooked swiftly and eat it almost immediately. So just like that unturned cake, the enemies have devoured us and swallowed us whole. So, in fact, our history has taught us that whether God was on our side or not, that never prevented the enemies of the Jewish people from destroying us, from massacring us, from murdering untold numbers of our people, culminating, of course, with the Shoah, the 6 million Jews who died at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators during the Second World War, but also going back many centuries to the pogroms, to the Spanish Inquisition, and centuries before that to the Roman wars when so many Jews were murdered and exiled. And no matter whether God was on our side, we were still killed off, and we were exiled, and we were captured by foreign nations and turned into slaves, those of us who did survive. And so what does this say about God being on our side? And how does this, in a sense, pose a challenge to the psalmist, who is saying to God, basically, if not for you, I would not be here to tell this story. If not for you, we would not exist in the first place. Our enemies would have destroyed us, or nature would have swallowed us up. In my view, God being on our side does not need to be understood simplistically as, well, if God is with us, our enemies will be destroyed. If God is not with us, we will be destroyed. I think that God being with us, or for us, or on our side, is simply a matter of understanding that even through adversity, and even if we are feeling assailed and attacked by our enemies, the mere fact that we can hold on to our faith and our belief in God, that we can embrace God even during such moments of difficulty, forces God to be on our side. The outcome may seem to give the lie to that. We may suffer misfortune, even death and destruction. But that doesn't mean that God isn't with us. Even up until the very last moment, according to the martyrology that I mentioned earlier, we are reminded that when the great Rabbi Akiva was suffering cruel torture and martyrdom at the hands of the Romans, he died reciting the Shema on his lips. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, declaring, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Even at that last final moment, when he knew he was about to lose his life and his soul was about to leave his body, he left this world with the name of God and a declaration of faith on his lips. And that is what it means in the ultimate test to have God on our side. Thank you.